United States and watching this live, this is Watches with Dennis. I am Dennis, and I am here with the typical Saturday live stream that I like to do. So we are going to cover mostly new watches today, like I said we would on the prior live stream, which was actually held on Thursday. But I did add in, I've already edited the title and edited the video description, but I've also went ahead and added in a topic at the end to discuss Hodinkee and the changes involving their acquisition by Watches of Switzerland, because I think that's probably going to be interesting to most of you who would watch a channel like this. In terms of housekeeping items, not a whole lot to go over. As I just mentioned a little bit ago, I did go ahead and do a live stream on Thursday. I've actually been doing live streams on Friday the last, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I lose track. Anyway, just playing around with some other times because some people kind of mention that they wish they could watch live, but the Saturday time is completely inconvenient for a lot of people, which is totally understandable. I do this time because it's one of the few times I can be very, very consistent with and not have to be disruptive. And I don't like to cancel shows unless I absolutely have to. And I think people seem to prefer there being a sort of schedule to follow. And I have noticed that viewership is a lot more steady now that I've been really consistent about this particular time slot. However, I've been playing around with doing some other topics, usually less focused on the news and more just opinion-based sorts of things, like what I just did this week earlier, which was 5 of my favorite current production Reversos, which was a viewer requested topic. So things like that, I've kind of been playing around with doing that on a different day of the week. So I tried Thursday. I didn't remember I was going up against football because, quite frankly, if it's not the Chiefs, I don't pay attention to who's playing what. But went ahead and tried that. Also did a little bit earlier because when I was doing the Fridays, it's very late for me. And I'm noticing if I go back and play part of the video, I look fatigued because I'm absolutely exhausted by that point. So anyway, still playing around a little bit with that. But I do want to go ahead and preemptively say I have no intentions of doing a weekday stream this next week. I have evening meetings and such, and it's just not going to be convenient. But if you have ideas for topics for things like that, let me know, and I will be absolutely happy to entertain doing those. Since it's live, I don't usually on the pre-recorded, but on the live streams on the wrist, this is a Seiko. This is where I should just actually take it off and show you guys, but pretty basic design-wise. It's not got a fancy name. This is the Seiko 7N43 4090 in terms of the case number. So this was my dad's watch. So he does not wear watches anymore. Ever since he retired, he has become one of those, I have a phone, why would I look at a watch? So he actually a few weeks ago gave me all of his watches. Now, he didn't have very many. Most of them are like novelty watches. They're all quartz. But there are a couple that were pretty interesting. This was his daily, the Seiko. And then he also has a Bulova Accutron. So now they were on those. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I remember them from growing up because they always had them on these bracelets, but they're both came on Twistoflex style bracelets. There's a brand called Speidel that's known for making those, and one of the Bulovas on one of those Speidels. Seiko actually had Seiko branded Twistoflex back in the day before they fell out of favor, probably because I think they kind of tear at the arm here a little bit, but they have, I think, springs in them, and they're very stretchy. So the bracelet, you don't undo a clasp. It actually just stretches over your wrist. So last night I tried to size that because my wrist is a lot smaller. See, because I'm on YouTube, the rule is I have to have a small wrist. So I pulled 10 links out to get his size down to my size. However, sizing them is a bit of a chore, and actually getting it changed wasn't that bad. The problem is there are these fold over prongs, and I don't have the proper equipment, so I could not get it to feel proper even once it was seated because I couldn't get the prongs down right because needle nose tires aren't fine enough. Whine. I've ordered a couple of black leather straps because ultimately I would probably wear it like that anyway because I'm not used to metal bracelets hugging that closely on the wrist. But if that's the style you like, Speidel still exists and they still sell Twistoflex. Just be aware you might need some parallel pliers or something to properly size those particular items. So I won't be doing review videos on those or anything, but they'll be in the state of the collection. At least those two. I don't know, like a novelty Razorbacks watch when I didn't go to the University of Arkansas. Probably not on. That's not going in the box. I might just keep it. I don't even think that one was open. I may just sell that one on eBay if there are any hogs out there that want to go ahead and buy one. Let me go ahead and say hello to the chat, and then we will roll right into our topics. We have 4 notable releases to go over today, and then we will also discuss that Hodinkee topic at the end. So good morning, Kevin. I saw you got that greeting in before I even went live, so welcome to the live stream. Always glad for you to be here. Thomas with the Escapement Show, good morning. I'm glad you could make it. Rob, thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Hope things have been going well for you in life and in the pinball world. Kyoji, also a 99-cent club member, says very cool Seiko. Yes, it's like it's not branded as a 5. It's not branded as an. It just says there's nothing other than the movement at the bottom of the dial. It says nothing but Seiko, and then it's a day date. It's their what would we say? Well, on this all gold configuration, it's very much their day date version, right? The Bulova, I believe, is actually looks a lot like that as well, though smaller. I think that is actually, I know because I got out my calipers. The Bulova is a 34 millimeter watch. That would be the smallest round watch in my collection. And Underhay says, hello, everyone. Finally managed to join you. Well, I am glad you are here. I'm glad all of you are here. And if you're not here live and you're watching the recording, feel free to comment on any of these watches and such that we talk about in the comments. I do go back and read them. I don't always reply to all of them, especially if they're very, very snarky, but I do look them over. So let us start with one that's going to be the least surprising element, because if you watched the video I did on Thursday, you already know that I already know about these watches, and that is Jaeger-LeCoultre or JLC, because no one says Jaeger-LeCoultre right. And in fact, I've just said it 2 different ways. So everyone just calls them JLC. One of my most favorite brands that I do not own. I have owned a Reverso before, but I can no longer claim that I own any JLC watches. However, I do always like to observe what they're doing, especially in the dress watch space, because they are some of my most favorite dress watch manufacturers, and the Reverso remains the most iconic piece in their collection and my personal favorite, because I can't always just walk off the beaten path. Sometimes I have to be like everyone else and go, the Reverso is the greatest thing that they make. However, I do need to note their master line, like their master ultra thins, master controls, whatever versions you want. Those are very, very nice watches. And if you're more into a round watch, definitely check those out because they're underappreciated. So you'll see this, a blog to watch entry up on the screen. There is a link in the video description so you can actually go and read this article. They came out with the Reverso Tribute is like the most popular line, and it's generally aesthetically my most favorite style of Reverso that they do. This is not one watch, though. They've added 4 to the Reverso Tribute collection. You see up here at the top one of the most affordable ones that has just come out. This is a stainless steel blue hour and minute only, very classically inspired version of the Reverso Tribute. And they did the same in this white. It's I believe, a radial brushed style pattern that's not going to show up very well in these images. These are both monoface versions, stainless steel versions of the watch. Then there was this version in gold, that pink gold, as they would call it, a blue radial pattern brushed dial, which is a small seconds configuration. It also this is one of the steel ones. Looking at the case back, they have actually done, the one I owned had engine turning. They've done an interesting striping pattern on the interior portion that faces the back. This is mirror finished, incidentally. If you never handled a Reverso and flipped a monoface over, this is like a mirror. They will engrave. You can even get art and such sometimes put on the backs of these, so that it's generally encouraged if you want to do an engraving watch. A Reverso is a really popular option if you go with a monoface. So here's that white one we looked at earlier, again, with it popping out to be flipped over. So now this was my favorite. And this one on my Thursday live stream was one of my 5 that I gave you of my 5 favorite in production Reversos. And it's like, this one's not even been out a week yet, so how can it be my favorite? And the answer is because I can do what I want. So this is the actual, we already looked at the blue side, which is the front facing side. This is a duo face. So this is, you can tell because the crown's now on the left instead of the right. So they flipped it over. And a lot of these duo face watches are designed for GMT purposes. So travel watches. So you have the blue version with the classically designed small seconds configuration like this. And then you have it, let's say at 10:10, and then you go ahead and you flip it over and you can move the hour hand. I think the minute hand is tied, but you can move the hour hand. And so instead of this saying 10:10 as well, which it could, you could have it say 2:10 because you've moved over 4 time zones to the east. So day night indicator, this is not a small seconds. on this bottom portion of the flip side of the duo face. This is actually a 24-hour hand to let you know day and night. And then they also released a gray radial brush tourbillon. Now, that's my least interesting version of the watch. I've never cared for the tourbillon as a complication of wristwatches. I think it's silly. I know it looks really cool watching it spin around, but because it doesn't seem to provide any meaningful timekeeping purpose to a wristwatch, I've never been able to get behind it. But it's a duo face as well, so you can see what the inside dial face looks like if you were to flip it out of the traditional position. So anyway, why are these interesting besides they are new dials and new ways to look? The steel ones are noteworthy because they are smaller. One of the complaints I've heard from people, Koji, who's in the live stream, has mentioned before on a few of the Reversos that they are too big for his wrist. And they've started to get a little on the long in the tooth side, as in they're rectangles. So they're never particularly wide, but it is not unusual for them to start moving up in the length. So the actual lug-to-lug distance on the wrist, the one I had was near on, I think, 49 millimeters, which for a rectangle is pretty large. I've told myself if I get another Reverso, it will not be that long. And so the stainless steel ones that they've come out with here, they are much more traditional sized, more to the original 1930s aesthetic, because the Reverso came out, I think, in 1931. So the dimensions on the stainless steel monofaces, you can maybe barely, I'll blow the screen back up here, but I've highlighted it as best I can, but it's 45.5 basically millimeters lug to lug, 27.5 width, and then it's only 8.5 millimeters thick. So it's a very small watch, but 45 millimeters or 45.5, or technically 45.6 in this specific instance for this white one and the blue one. Those are very, like, most wrists are going to be okay with it. Larger, really large male wrists might find that a bit too small. However, 45.6 millimeters lug to lug. A lot of Seikos are flirting with that range, round Seikos. They might be more like a 47 or so, but just to give you a sense. But rectangles wear big, so they feel like there's more wrist presence even when they're smaller than a round watch. So it's just something. Don't treat them like round watches and think it's an apples to apples thing. Especially on that width, that 27 millimeters width, that's plenty wide for a, I mean, maybe not if you have an 8-inch wrist, but if you're like in that 6-inch to 7.25-inch wrist range, I think you're going to find a 27.4 millimeter width rectangle is going to work just fine for you. Those the others aren't all that small. So the gold one I showed you, that's more. It's smaller than some of their stuff. It's 47 millimeters lug to lug, though, 28, a little over 28 millimeters wide. It's still under 10 millimeters thick. The tourbillon, I have no idea because I didn't read the stats on it. Okay, apparently it's very small. Lug to lug, it's only 45.5 millimeters, which is a bit surprising to me. But anyway, pricing. So the prices range. The steel ones are just under $9,000. The monoface steels, they're $8,900. The tourbillon is $111,000 because it's a tourbillon and it's JLC, and they have to gouge you for that. And then the pink gold, which is my favorite, is $25,500. So these will hit the secondhand market. They will, other than even the tourbillon will. They'll just not hit them in large numbers. And these will all be available for less if you go gray or you go secondhand. None of these are limited. This is standard behavior. Reversos depreciate as a almost general rule. I can't think of a single one that doesn't. So if you're into these, wait a year and you'll probably be able to find them on the gray market. But I want to go ahead and mention them, especially this gold one, which is my personal favorite. I'll see what the chat thinks of these in a moment. But anyway, so I just wanted to go ahead and show you all four that dropped because on Thursday, we only talked about the one that's currently on the screen. So let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat. I don't think there's too much that I have to. We already said hello to Underhay for being here. Adam, welcome to the live stream. I got to see and try on a Reverso chronograph and Master Nuctra Thin Perpetua last weekend. Both are amazing. I have not been able to handle the Reverso chronograph. Every JLC dealer I have been to is not one that gets to receive the chronographs. And when I was in Dallas, they told me that there was a different sort of flagship boutique, that the nearest one, and it was not in the city, I don't believe. And they at that one had told me there are only certain stores that get to have the chronographs. Everyone else is stuck with the more basic models, and that's just the way they approach it. Because there are a lot of authorized dealers that carry JLC. They're versus them having their own boutiques. But there's a pecking order to it. I ran into the same thing actually in Dallas when I went to the Vacheron, and it's like, Vacheron, wait a moment, they don't have very many stores, and it was a boutique, and they don't have the malt there. I asked them about it. They had a book with pictures of it, and they go, yeah, those are only at certain select Vacheron boutiques. I'm like, but you are a boutique. They're like, well, we're not a boutique that gets the malt. Not that I think that's a high seller, so I don't think they were pretty. They had the 222s and the overseas and the 1921s, and the overseas are where Vacheron makes all their money. So I suppose from the business perspective, they didn't really care too much. But it was like I think they told me if I wanted to get try on a malt, I'd have to go to New York City. So because New York gets everything because everyone lives there. So it's just one of those things. RK, welcome to live stream, by the way. RK, wish it was smaller with no seconds. Well, some of them now are. So, as I noted, I have to jump back up because I can't remember sizing very well in my head, but close to the 1931 sizing, the steel ones, if you're okay with like this one here on the screen, then you do have some better options. So they're down to that 24.4 by 27.4 and a thickness of 8.5. So they are much more wearable than where JLC kind of moved upside, even though watches have been getting smaller lately. JLC has kind of moved upsize on a lot of the Reversos. And you're not the only person I've heard, RK, that has mentioned that they really only like the Reverso as an hour-minute, time only, no second version. So they do have a few more now, two more specifically, now in the catalog than they did just 2 weeks ago. Thomas with Escapement Show says, I missed your stream on your top 5 Reversos. Unfortunately, we'll catch it this weekend. I really like that JLC have made a tribute Reverso that is faithful to the original size. Yes, I think this will resonate reasonably well. I'm not going to say super well because it's the Reverso. A Reverso is an interesting watch because it's very iconic. Some people might even argue, like in the ideal, like if you were to do I'm going to do the air quotes, if you do the ideal collection, that the Reverso would be a watch that would need to be in that. But for all of its fame and its very iconic sort of evergreen look, they don't sell all that well. So again, if you're not comfortable paying near on $10,000, and I would not blame you, they were not this much. Richemont has driven, I'm sure they've done it with their other brands as well, but maybe because I pay more attention to JLC. What Richemont has done to JLC pricing has absolutely lost the plot. You look at how much Rolex price increases have been, which have been relatively constrained, and then you compare that, but it's a popular brand, so I think it's noteworthy. And then you look at what Richemont has done with JLC, and you're like, what? Some of their watches, I think, over a 2-year period went up near on 40%, and they didn't change the movements. They're the same dials, the same movements, it's the same tech. And now my dander's getting up because it's like, you have no excuse. Inflation was not that high, and you have no excuse for it. It's gouging. It's desperation, and they're buckling in on this whole, hey, the watch market is cooled off. We can't sell as many units. Let's sell fewer units for more money. And I think that can work if you made an improvement. At least these are new. But I still think people are going to look and go, these are the same movements that are in all the other Reverso tributes. So why would we pay you this much more money just because you finally got the sizing? I mean, there's less metal on them. So they're smaller watches. I don't know. So I think they'll do okay, but I think JLC has bit off more than they can chew on pretty much all of their models, and only because of pricing. They have not gone and scooped up all the old Reversos off of the used market. There is a lot of affordable alternatives that you can go and find straight up out of their catalog that are not old, because the market they basically have overproduced their watches. So anyway, Zenith has run into those problems too, but I don't think Zenith has the same pricing problem that JLC does. Ken, welcome to the live stream. Ken says, the area of the lugs and the bezel on the reverse is almost the same as the dial. In the age of dial hype, these watches don't work. And that can also be a factor that will constrain them a bit. This appeals to a very particular type of person. It's a person that wants dress watches. And so it's classic, it's understated. I still personally feel that the Reverso is heads and shoulders above basically all of the Cartier tanks. Though the Cartier tanks will give you different shapes and such. So if you look at a tank American, it is a very different feel than a Reverso. But the straight up, Tank Louise and stuff, I just think JLCs look better. But again, I don't think the tanks are exactly flying off the shelves either. I think Cartier is moving other watches, though. Cartier also is very successful in marketing watches to women, and most other watch companies really struggle with it. So, and again, because of the elegance of the tank, there's a lot of it appeals to all genders. It's maybe a good way to phrase it. So they've got some stuff going for them that I don't think JLC does. Underhay says the blue duo face GMT is beautiful. We will go and bring back up that's not the duo face. That is the steel one. There we go. There's a picture of it. I like to try and get the pictures to be timely with whatever you guys are talking about. Escapement. The duo face are definitely my favorite types of reversos. I wished I had one. I don't think I'd have gotten rid of my Reverso if it had been a duo face, but I don't know. Adam says it was their boutique in New York City next to Longa. I have to answer the Watches with Dennis Discord, which the link in the video description if you want to participate in the Discord channel. It's free. There's nothing you have to do other than join it if you want to participate. I know that Thomas with the Escapement Show has asked a question, and I've read it. I just haven't formulated my response. I'll mention it briefly here because Adam has brought up Longa, about Longa and like its status. I'm not going to talk about its status here. I try not to fanboy out on this channel. Longa is my most favorite brand, and they do things that I do not like. In terms of designs, there are a few that I do not care for, but almost everything that they produce, I like. I like a lot. Thankfully, they are so expensive that it's generally not something I have to consider much about. And I don't focus a lot of my channel time on Longa because of that and where they kind of fit in the market. Their boutique practices, I feel like they're taking a few too many pages out of AP, but that's another story. So anyway, I greatly do. If I was a one brand collector, it would be Longa. Like if money was no object, I would just have Longas. But I'm not that style of collector. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't just have Longas. But in that hypothetical world of Dennis, what would be a brand that you would solo brand do? It would be Longa. Okay, let's see. Adam also says that they did have everything, but Reverso Duochrono has a 3-month wait. 3 months is not that bad. That's not a bad wait. So again, that kind of, they probably just don't produce very many. So it's probably more in that vein. Koji says, if you're ever in Vegas, there's a nice JLC boutique at Caesars that always is well stocked and had a couple really special pieces. I've actually never been to Nevada. So maybe I'll get a work conference there at some point, but currently I have not. Patrick with Pocket Watch Time, welcome to the live stream. I just can't love the Reverso. That's okay. It doesn't love you either because it's a machine and it doesn't care what you feel. All right. Let's see. Patrick's responding to Koji, saying he's enjoyed his latest video quite a bit. And Adam says the Longa 1 is a dream watch. That is my one. Longa is a Longa 1. It's the straight up most basic version of a Longa 1 that you can get. It is my most favorite watch in my collection. Absolutely is. Ken says, Cartier markets the tank better. Hence, it makes the Reverso feel and trade almost like a ladies' watch. In other words, bad resale. JLC should explore more sporty Reversos, like bringing back the Squadra sizes. I'm not familiar with the Squadras, but I do agree with your follow-up of what they've got to lose. I don't think they have a lot to lose. And that's a very good point, Ken, because I think that the issue with, I agree with a lot with what you've said. JLC is on, as an expression I like to say, is they're on the struggle bus. Especially on anything sporty. And maybe that's why they've held back, Ken. I don't know. But like the Polaris, it's not exactly setting the world on fire. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, I think while they've done some new dials and stuff with it, it's long in the tooth. It feels like it needs a refresh. It's not like the Submariner where it's just like this iconic look that can just live on. There are other like compressor style watches that do far better than the Polaris. And what can you name that's a sports watch out of JLC that's the Polaris or is other than the Polaris? I can't. And I do feel like I pay attention to JLC, but no. And I've tried on a Polaris and I wasn't impressed either. So them taking something iconic like the Reverso and trying to sportify it, I think it would be an interesting experiment. I definitely think it would be. I'll give them kudos for at least trying if they do something like that. But like they used to put them on bracelets and stuff. They don't even do that anymore. And that I'm aware of. I don't know if they've got any in the current catalog that are on bracelet. Maybe they have one, but something. I don't know. I know, but that's an interesting point. I do. They are definitely the marketing versus Cartier. Yeah, there's absolutely no comparison. Joel says, Dennis, I think it's time for a top 5 Longa live stream. That would be a fun one. You know what? That's a pretty good idea. But as I noted at the very start, for those of you who did not join, I will not be doing a weekday stream this upcoming week. I've got too much. I got evening meetings and stuff this week. It would be terrible. I would do a terrible job at it. Koji says the Squadron never sold well, but it's a cool piece. I will look into it. Now, Pocket Watch here to provide the spicy differences versus my opinions. Polaris is awesome, but I'd buy other things for that price. A problem in general for JLC, which is why I know people, when they've looked at JLC, I say, unless you like really want the AD experience or you're really obsessed with the warranty, really look secondhand or look gray. You're going to find what you want at way, way less. And you're going to get a lot of watch for your money at that point. So like I tried on the Polaris at the AD. If I was to get one, I would look and see how are they pricing secondhand, like how much depreciation. I know they depreciate. I have no idea how much because I've never cared about the design enough to seriously look about getting one. But at this point, I'm down to one dive watch. I have my Baltic and that's it because I just don't wear dive watches very much. So Thomas says the Squadra range was awful, I thought. Not a real dress watch style, too sporty. But I think that's the point, is what I'm getting from Ken and from Koji, is that it's trying to be sporty. So I'll look into it off stream. Patrick notes that he's not familiar with it either. So I don't feel like I'm the only person who doesn't know what any of you are talking about. But you know what I do know about? I know about Grand Seiko. That's another brand I used to own. I don't own one anymore. Do you guys know Grand Seiko? You live stream people, you got to know Grand Seiko, right? You know that they're inspired by nature, right? If you didn't know, they will tell you. They will tell you repeatedly. They will tell you on every release. They will tell you on every release, even if it's a European Union exclusive release. And that's what we've got here in this monochrome article, is we've got 2 new Grand Seikos, the SBG W321, which I believe is the red one you see, and the SBG Y040, which is the blue one you see. Yes, they have Japanese names in addition to that, and you'll notice I've dodged saying them because I never say anything right. That's not in. Actually, I mispronounce half my English words too. So I think this is Nishikigoe and Shaisentien, though I think I said that more Chinese. So I apologize. I know I messed them up, so I do apologize. But I felt I needed to try at least for the lulls. So here you go. They're inspired by nature because everything from JLC is inspired by nature. I wish for once they'd do something inspired by, I don't know, machines or something, just something weird. Transformers, I don't know. But all right, so why are they inspired by, like, what's the nature inspiration? Because you look at them and maybe you might get it with the blue one. With the blue one, it's inspired by the ripples of the pond. And that's kind of the backdrop here you can kind of see. All right, so it's inspired by like those Japanese koi ponds. These are the ripples on the surface of the pond. The red one, those are the scales of the koi fish. Now, why are we doing a Japanese pond theme for a European Union exclusive watch? I assume because the watchmakers are in Japan and they aren't inspired by European nature. But I found it odd regardless. So anyway, two new Grand Seikos. The red one's actually surprisingly small. When I first saw these, I thought this is going to be the standard Grand Seiko sizing. I'm kind of scrolling to the end because I wondered if they had the summary at the end. They do not. So they have them in their little section. So here's the quick info. I still think this is too thick. You know, I've whined about thickness in Omega, but Grand Seiko is right there in the same boat, which is part of the reason I don't own my Grand Seiko anymore. But 36.5 millimeters by 11.6. That's not huge, but it's kind of thick for a time only. For a time only watch, that's 36.5 millimeters in diameter. I think near on 12 millimeters of thickness is kind of big. Stainless steel. This is an in-house caliber 9S64. That is not their high beat mechanical movement, but it is one of their mechanical movements. So +5 to -3 seconds per day, 4 hertz movement. It is a limited edition of 300, not 3 pieces. Well, for once, Seiko actually does something really limited. I would be amazed. 6,100 euro though, so it's not extreme, especially when you think about the pricing we just talked about with the most basic of Reversos. So there's that. The blue one is bigger but thinner, and is a spring drive. So it's a spring drive watch. So it's going to be plus or minus 15 seconds per month, 72-hour power reserve. That's the 9R31. I think that, I don't know if that was the spring drive I had or not. It might not be. I might have had an older version, but it's 38.5 millimeters. So much more of what I think of modern dress watch aesthetic sizing. At least for me, I really like that 38 to 39 millimeter for gold dress watches. This is rose gold, 18 karat case. It's only 10.2 millimeters thick. So that actually, it's for a dress watch, it's a little thick for a time only piece, but only a little bit. Like the Longo one's thicker than this. Granted, the Longo one has complications, but this has to accommodate the spring drive movement and stuff. But it's thinner than the steel watch, so I wanted to stress that it's over a millimeter thinner. I think it's almost 1.5 millimeters thinner. So it is limited to 20 pieces. So it truly is limited. So here's my non-existent hat off to you, Grand Seiko, for doing a truly limited set of watches. Very expensive though, $31,100. That is on the high end for a time only gold watch. There are a lot. I think you're asking for the 20 limited count to do a bit of a heavy lift, because that 3,100, that 31,000 euro, this is like Calatrava pricing. So, which is gold also. So I think that's going to be a struggle, because what's the conversion? I see Pocket Watch Time has said $35,000. I'm assuming US dollars, since he's in the US, as am I. Ouch. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so yeah, you're up there. Actually, that's probably a little bit more than some of the more basic Calatravas, which I think flirt with the 31 to 33,000, kind of around 30. It's about the same. But for a Grand Seiko versus such a prestigious brand, that's tough. That's a tough ask. That's kind of like when I saw that new Toric out of Parmigiani, and I love Parmigiani. It's another one of my favorite brands, but it's like you're asking for a lot of money for a brand that just isn't that popular. Even if the watchmaking is above what its competition is, it's just not that popular. So anyway, so those are the two new releases. So I'm curious, again, if you're watching the recording, to comment what you think on these or on this strategy. But I'm curious what the live stream thinks. So I'm going to go ahead and get caught up with the chat right now. So Madman, welcome to the live stream, by the way. I haven't greeted you yet. Blue and gold is always a winning combo. I really do like the blue and gold. Let me go ahead and say that, because I didn't give you any of my opinions. I don't really care for this red one. I like red dial watches a lot, even though I don't own any anymore. I still have a fondness for them as a sometimes watch. I don't know if it's the patterning or what, but like, it's attractive. Like, all their dials are almost always attractive. I don't know about the gold secondhand against this. I get that they've done the minute markers in the same color and it matches the logo. I don't know. It's not really, I just don't feel like, if I was to get a red watch, I would rather go ahead and get a Zenith Defy. They have a very nice red one. Or, spend some more money and get a used, Mad Red out of Moser or something, though that's going to be a lot bigger. This obviously is a lot smaller watch. The Defy is competitively sized against this. So now the blue one, though, this looks great. I'm not a huge fan of blue dials, but I agree with Madman here. This blue on rose gold looks really nice. At least in these renders, it looks really, really good. I'd like to see it in person, but it's in the EU and I am not. It's too far away. I don't get to have it. And I wouldn't want to spend that much anyway. Kochi says, I think your Japanese is getting a bit better, Dennis. It is not, but I do appreciate the sentiment that you think it is. Or it was that bad last time. And actually, I sat there and I thought about it a little bit harder this time. Thomas with Escapement says, Grand Seiko will tell you everything about the ancients walking over frozen lakes. I got changed into the narrative voice. In the springtime, as they gazed at the blossoms on the trees. Well, you said lol, but I felt you did a more maniacal laugh there. So yes, he's screaming. Yes, Thomas is screaming the Grand Seiko dial to you. Yes, use your words and paint the picture. Weave the song of making there. Koji says, I know it comes across as hokey, and even I have to roll my eyes at times, but that really is part of the ethos in Japanese culture. It's a fair point, and I'm not going to tell them to. All right, I was going to say I'm not going to tell them to quit being inspired by nature. With me having just 3 minutes ago said, why do you have to keep being inspired by nature? Why can't you be inspired by some machines or something? Therefore, I did actually just tell them to quit doing what they do. But let's pretend I didn't say that. Let me do it the other way and say, why not both? Why can't we have both? Here is the thing I think is they explain it too much. That's how I'm not original enough to come up with that. It's probably Ariel Adams that I remember hearing on a Blog to Watch podcast at one point. I think it was him. It sounds like something he'd say, where it was sort of they just like their marketing strategy. They haven't quite figured it out yet. So they go all in, give 110%, right? And they just give this 110% in this selling the whole nature thing. But my problem with it is it's starting to feel super redundant, even though like the way they explain it when I read it, it makes sense to me. But how many different dials based off of water are we going to have? Like at some point you do get tired of looking at the pond and you want to look at something else for a little while, right? I don't know, but it feels like there's a lot that's done by trees, a lot that's done by the same mountain, a lot that's done by snow, and a lot that's done by water. And they are all different, but here's the problem. At this point, has Grand Seiko, who do they win over is I guess my question. Who looks at this, which is an attractive looking watch, but it's like, I just didn't like the other rose gold blue dial watches they've done. Finally, they've done the waves on top of a pond pattern that I've been longing for. Like, who have they not convinced yet? Because nothing else about the watch is changing. So it's really just different dial textures. I don't think the colors are changing so much. I think it's mostly just textures at this point, but I could be wrong. I do not look as much at the Grand Seiko catalog as I do like the JLC catalog. So that's kind of where I'm at. Now, full-on stupid nature thing, I think I brought this up on the Thursday live stream, is Swatch. When the Swatch Strawberry Moon Swatch came out, I should do I don't know how to do a shirt that would make fun of it. I should do a shirt that makes fun of it, though. That campaign was one of the most ridiculous, eye-rolling, cringe-worthy things I have ever seen come out of the Swiss industry since AP put a dead girl in a lawn chair and affixed a 5-figure gold watch to her limp dead wrist. It is because the way they're like, we forged the seconds hand under the light of the strawberry moon. It's like, what is this astrology? Nobody cares about this crap. It was super stupid. It felt like when I was supposed to like hold some crystals while they were selling me the watch or something, and they'd read my fortune and tell me about, the future of Nostradamus. And it was just, anyway, that's not this watch. I'm whining. Sorry. I went on a little rant. But that's the sort of thing. Like Grand Seiko's it feels like to some Americans like me, it feels like they're almost walking that line a little bit. It's a little too heavy. Just a little bit. A little too heavy. Ken said, someone said Grand Seiko makes these watches for the Western audience and most Japanese wouldn't be caught dead with them. I don't know if that's true, but clearly these two are marketed to the European audience because they're only sold in the European audience. Koji does say that plenty of Japanese do wear Grand Seiko watches. And Thomas notes that Grand Seiko is very popular among Japanese watch enthusiasts. Joel is a big meh on these Grand Seikos, even the one that's based off of a fish. Look at can't you see the fish? I also think koi tend to me look to orange, not red. So this looks too red to me, but whatever. Koji says the red one isn't that appealing to me, but the blue one is quite gorgeous. Underhay says, I like Grand Seiko, but not these two. The blue is okay, but a ridiculous price, as you said. Well, there are only 20, so you'd be one of 20 people with this ridiculously priced watch. You just have to go and buy it. Patrick says blue is fire. Madman says, yeah, too much money, but it is gorgeous. Colby, welcome to the live stream, by the way, Colby. I really hate that Grand Seiko doesn't use great anti-reflective on their crystals. The ones I've had have had average to poor AR coating. I wish all their crystals use Seiko super clear coating. That's I can't remember well enough. I didn't notice an issue. I had an older Grand Seiko. I had one of the early runs when they finally didn't have the Seiko at the 6 o'clock position. So it's not a super old watch, but I don't know, because the dial was a radial brush, so it did reflect a lot of light. That's interesting. I'd not thought about the AR coating issues. I've noticed the AR coating, like I've had frustrations with Omega putting the AR coating on the surface of the Sapphire. IWC used to do that too. I had an IWC which I bought used, and there were scratches in the AR. And when you take photos in the sunlight and such, you could really, or just look at it. But I first noticed it when I took some photos, and I thought I had contamination on the dial, and I realized it was scratches in the AR, because the AR coating isn't as solid as sapphire, which made me wonder, why are we putting AR coating on the outside of the crystals? Most brands don't do it, but a few do. Koji says, I know, Dennis, it comes across as really pretentious. I mean, again, we do need to factor in that it may not be seen as pretentious within their own culture, though. But the Strawberry Moon thing was pretentious in all cultures. We know that. I think Swatch knew that. I don't know what they were thinking. Patrick says, Grand Seiko used to make geometric dials. This blue dial reminds me of this. Okay, I'm not familiar enough with their geometric ones to say much about that. Adam says, I'm holding out for the Cherry Blossoms Grand Seiko. If I was to go, I feel like such a tourist saying it, but if I was to go to Japan, I would be sorely tempted to buy a watch. And I think Koji is right. He's mentioned this before, that I should get a Creedor if I were to do it. But I would be tempted to get, like, I really like that pink cherry blossom. They have a few, of course. They've kind of redone it, done dials in a similar aesthetic. I like those a lot, though, where they kind of look pink or white, depending on the lighting in particular. It's different it does feel very different than everything else. And I've never had a watch that was a pink dial watch. I like those, and I kind of like the breast cancer awareness ones that Zenith does. I think they just had another one of those really recently, but I have some. But I work in public health, so I have like neckties and stuff that are breast cancer awareness. So it just sort of fits occupationally. But anyway, Thomas says, I find that Grand Seiko are a great dial maker, but some of their dials are hit and miss. I love some of their dials, but some of them are overly themed. Lakes, floorboards. I don't know about floorboards, but mountaintops, etc. Al, thank you for being a 99-cent club member, by the way, Al, and welcome to this live stream. There should be a land, air, and sea one. Yes, Braemont, the Grand Seiko X Braemont collaboration. The collaboration we didn't know we wanted, and maybe we don't, but the collaboration that we now need. Aussie Expat, welcome to live stream, by the way. Can't wait to hear Omega getting slammed by an OG. I'm not going to be overly cruel to it, but that is coming up. And Ken said, Dennis, aren't the Chiefs in a different state than you, and hence you'd be considered a bandwagoner? An interesting point, Ken. Yes, they are in a different state, because Kansas City, there are two Kansas cities. There's Kansas City, Kansas, and there's Kansas City, Missouri. Everything good, like sports and stuff, is all on the Missouri side, because that's where most of the population is. Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri are contiguous. Like those cities basically touch each other. It's separated by a river, basically. And so, long story short, not really, because teams are seen as regional, and because they're right there on the Kansas border. Like in the world of the NFL, it would not be seen as a bandwagoner issue. Just like in Western Kansas, because I'm in Kansas, and who else knows anything about Kansas on this channel? In Western Kansas, it's not atypical for Western Kansans to identify with the Denver Broncos, because they're actually closer to Denver. So proximity drives a lot of that. I mean, so here's a good counter question to you football fans would be, so what about someone who lives in Oklahoma? There is no professional sports team in Oklahoma, and arguably they're not all that close to any. So Dallas Cowboys go down to Texas, go up to Kansas City. So Kansas, we don't have a professional NFL team, so we have to be adopted by one, and they are like, it would take me less than 30 minutes to drive to Chiefs Stadium. I'm that close. So no, I wouldn't be seen as a bandwagoner, but they are in a different state. Coach says it's the only pro football team we've had in Kansas, and we're certainly not rooting for the Donkeys. I had someone, a law clerk who used to work with me at a prior job, and he was from not all that far west, but he was a Bronco fan. He's still a Bronco fan, and I don't know, but it's how it links up. Kobe says he's from Kansas City area too, grew up in Liberty, although he lives in Tampa now. So interesting. What a small world. Yeah, Koji is from Kansas, which I keep forgetting, or at least he's lived in Kansas. I live in Kansas. Joel says, as a Chargers fan, I wish I had bandwagon somewhere else as a child. Well, they've not looked bad this season. Kobe says, Kansas City, Missouri definitely has a national marketing problem, though. Yeah, I actually, after the first Chiefs win with Patrick Mahomes, I have a shirt which says, welcome to the great state of Kansas. And it's a red shirt, and I'm not wearing it today, but it has the shape of Missouri on it because President Trump, after they won, had congratulated Kansas because he saw Kansas City. And I think Patrick Mahomes had a photo of him wearing that shirt. So someone had got that for me as a gift because it's like, everyone thinks when they hear Kansas City that it's in Kansas. And the irony is there is a Kansas City, Kansas. It's just like we have a Manhattan, Kansas. It's much smaller than Manhattan in New York, but just one of those things. Billy, welcome to Livestream, Billy. Back to watches. What do you think about the new Chrono Tokyo watches that were released? I did take a brief glance at them, but I didn't read up on them because they didn't resonate with me. So I thought they looked okay, but I didn't explore them. So I'm sorry, Billy, I don't have anything that I can add, but maybe some other people in the chat who have taken a look at the Chrono Tokyo watches have some other thoughts. Let's stay with Switzerland, but not do Omega yet. Sorry, Aussie. We gotta save the best for now second last, because I want to talk about the Hodinkee acquisition by Watches of Switzerland. So I've added that to the title and to the video details. However, Moser. So this is a brand I do own. I own a Pioneer, not the shade of blue, but Moser sure does love their blue dials. And so if you love blue dials, Moser is the brand for you, possibly. Their watches tend to be fairly large. So this one I wanted to mention briefly because I like a lot about it. This is their new Pioneer Retrograde Seconds watch. The Pioneer line is generally the most affordable line. It depends on the complications compared to the Endeavors and stuff, but the most inexpensive watches start in the Pioneer line. And the Pioneer is what I have. I have one of those. I have the funky blue version, which is the black DLC case, which I scratched that, I changed the strap again because I had to get a small strap, and then I merged the regular strap with one end and a small strap with the other to get it to fit better, which worked. And of course, my spring bar tool went and scratched right through that DLC coating, which incidentally, how do you mask DLC coating scratches? I had to look it up. Sharpies, but don't get regular Sharpies because they wipe off. Get the red super permanent Sharpies, and when they dry, it's a very good color match. So then the steel doesn't shine at you. So anyway, I did try it out and it did work very well. So FYI, so that you don't have to feel like, oh, I got to now go and get it recoated immediately or whatever, because that costs a few $100. But here you go. This is it's around that 43 millimeter sizing. So it's the traditional Pioneer sizing. Again, just the hour markers, pretty standard with the Pioneer. I don't like watches without hour markers, so I like this general configuration. Instead of where you might think of their tourbillon, because sometimes they love to do their tourbillons, which I'm not into. They did a retrograde, but not a retro minute, which is what we usually see. This is a retrograde seconds hand. It goes over for 30 seconds, then it jumps back. So it resets every 30 seconds. So visually, I've not seen a video of this, but visually, this would be a very, very interesting watch to look at. As usual, you have the standard, nicely finished movement, which I always felt their movements look fairly modern versus like they've got Geneva striping and stuff, but just the coloration and stuff that they do, the coating, the plating that they choose to use just feels a little more modern than a lot of Swiss watches. So anyway, I just thought it was a brief one to go ahead and discuss because it's like, okay, it's pretty cool. Price point, so new, almost 22 grand. It's not on bracelet, it's on rubber. Those rubber straps sell for about, oh gosh, because I had to buy one. They sell for about $350 or so. So the strap doesn't add much cost. So 21,900 US. The Pioneers with central seconds would run you closer to 14 to 15,000. So this is about a $6,000 to $7,000 markup for what's still a time only watch. So I don't know if the retro seconds is worthy of that much of a price jump, but it is a cool feature that I think a lot of people would find exciting visually. I definitely think it's more interesting to look at retrogrades that are moving all the time. And so while most watch brands, if they do it, will do a retro minute, like that, I always think of Gerald Gento with retrograde minutes, retrograde seconds. I think I've looked at some, I think Vacheron's had some before. Anyway, very, very cool. So, and I like the colorway. And again, they're not putting the brand on the dial. That's something they've been moving more and more to. I actually kind of like the invisible branding where it'd be the same color, but you could see it in certain lighting. I actually thought that looked really tasteful, but it looks just as tasteful to leave it off, quite frankly. It's just Moser's design language is so well known at this point that anyone who's a watch aficionado wouldn't need to be able to read the name of the brand. They would know a Moser, especially a Pioneer, from a mile. Those sides of those flanks of that case are very distinct. It's a very unique style. But so I like this overall. I don't love the price point. I'm curious how much it would come down. The Moser's regular Pioneers tend to lose about $4,000, new versus used. So I would assume this would probably trade closer. I think it would behave similar, since I don't believe it was limited or anything. So yeah, I don't see anything about any limits in the article from A Blog to Watch, which link in the video description if you want to actually read about the watch. So I would assume this might fall to being around 15 grand or so secondhand after a couple of years. It's going to be a little while. They don't make all that many watches. I think they're producing about 3,000 a year. So it'll be a while before they start hitting. But I think a lot of people buy Mosers and then find that they wear too big and they get rid of them. So they tend to do a decent turn, especially the stainless steel lines that they have, which are, of course, the most affordable to get into. So let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat on this real quick. Thomas says, I really like this Retrograde Seconds Moser. I was surprised that they introduced the Retrograde Seconds on the Pioneer line. I thought they may have brought it in on the smarter Endeavor line. I was a little surprised as well, because it's a complication I tend to associate more with dress watches, and their Endeavor line I find to be dressier. But I think it, especially given how they've done it with the large bridge work here for it, like they haven't tried to just make it look like it's floating on the dial. With the Endeavor, I feel like they would have felt they needed to try and make it more elegant than this, where it looks more industrial. And the Pioneer is their industrial line. So I think given the aesthetic angle they've gone with, this was the right answer. But I am surprised that they didn't do something, and maybe they will eventually do something where it's maybe a little more, that's not really the right word, but tastefully done, elegantly done might be another way to say it, and do it on an Endeavor where you're not seeing all this bridge work and stuff, but maybe they mask it in a different way, or they do it up in gold. I don't know. I'm rambling, but there's some stuff that I think they might want to make it look different than this if it was on an Endeavor. It's kind of where I'm at. Koji says, Moser does a really beautiful full balance bridge on their movements. Yes, I like their movements a lot. Patrick says, I like it. Made a boring watch more fun. It is more fun. Yeah, the time-only ones, I mean, the thing with Moser, the thing that for me with Moser is, I don't know why this is as blue as this is. Something went wrong. Is the... it's about the dials, the light play and the dials and stuff. But here's the thing with Moser, and that's where we'll bring back up Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko gives you a lot of interesting dial going on with their watches. And even with the price increases we've seen on Grand Seiko, they are far more accessible than the pricing on Moser. So it's like, if you want some, it depends on the colorway. Some of what Moser does, I like better than what Grand Seiko does. But Grand Seiko offers you, if you're all about like dial colors and textures and stuff, Moser is really just about coloration. So it's all like fume or Vanta black. They're not doing a lot of texture work, at least not in the Pioneers. So, but looking at how all of those dials play in the light, I don't even think Grand Seiko's really come all that close to it, but you do pay a premium for it. So it really just comes down to what you're into in dials, which is what makes this so interesting. And Thomas says, good point about the industrial look. Well, speaking of an industrial, Aussie's like, come on, dude, it's been 53 minutes. When are you going to get to Omega? We're going to get to Omega now. Compliments of Hodinkee. All right, I should have done a pre-recorded video. I could have had a few thousand views giving my thoughts on this, but I saved it for live. We're saving it for live. I was too lazy to do anything special. So here you go. We've got the first Omega in space. It's not the first Omega in space. It's the return of the first Omega in space. So it looks a lot like the old CK2998, but it's completely modernized in almost all particular ways. So here we go. What do we know? We know that they've gone with a blue-gray style. They've gotten the watch thinner than it used to be. They've gotten, perhaps controversially, they've done closed case back format rather than a display case back. But basic information. I'm going to go ahead and jump down to the bottom of this so we can go over the stats really, really quickly. So smaller sizing. So this has been general comments that I've looked online have been extremely excited about this watch, with some pushback for a few things. One, it still is only 50 meters of water resistant. And I know a lot of people are getting very, very tired of the Omega Speedmaster always being 50 meters. Personally, I think that's completely sufficient for a regular chronograph that's not designed to be a dive watch. But I understand in the modern era, a lot of people are really wishing that things would be up to 100. Thickness is down to 13.4 millimeters. I don't remember what the thickness was on the first Omega in Space reissue. I think it was about a millimeter thicker. I criticize Omega all the time about thickness. I tend not to bring it up with the Speedmaster because chronographs are always thicker, but I'm going to say full kudos to them for getting it thinner. I whine all the time about how they don't seem to care about thinness. They really did try here. They really did try to make it more wearable. That's probably the biggest thing that I see a lot of buzz about is the 39.7 millimeters in diameter. It's a more wearable Speedmaster for a lot of people. So there's excitement about that. I think the decision for the blue-gray dial, which is they did their CVD coding for that, which is something we've seen Omega do CVD before over in the Aquaterra line. That is my favorite part of the watch. I love gray. Gray is my favorite color. So that's probably why I'm wearing my gray shirt today. So blue-gray, it's almost reminds me of a gunmetal color. I think it looks really, really handsome on this particular watch. Printed indices, it's got the flat link bracelet. A lot of people are excited about the flat link bracelet. Of course, it's got the micro adjust, as is noted here. And then you've got the Metis certification, caliber 3861 going on. And the pricing, $7,900 on bracelet. It's a little bit cheaper than the Sapphire Sandwich professional moonwatch, and it's a bit more expensive than the Heslite version of that traditional, what I think of as the current production moonwatch. So it's found itself into a nice price point for a lot of people as well. So those are the main things that I've seen going for. Here's a better view of that dial. And of course, radially brushed. My favorite brush is the radial brush. You all who have seen this a while know this. Here's your kind of hidden Omega logo engraving. And again, it's very much vintage style otherwise. The old vintage applied Omega logo looks really good. Like this, I am not a Speedmaster fan in general, not the Moonwatch in particular. This reissue or this second attempt at the first Omega in Space has tried to right a lot of wrongs that purists care about that I don't care about. So like the dot over that, we don't see it in this angle, but like the dot, the people, this is where I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about because I really don't. Like the dot over 90. Like people, like the first one didn't have the dot over 90. And apparently a lot of you care about the dot over 90. I didn't know dots over 90s were such a thing, but they are. And so they've done it. So it's more true to the original version. And so that's the part I understand. It's more true to the original version. The colorway of the dial, I think, was a surprise. I think it's a welcome surprise because I actually like this colorway a lot. I like this look overall quite a bit more than the Sapphire Sandwich. Like if I were to pick between the two, it would be an easy pick for me to say I like this more. The main things of criticism I've seen besides the 50 meters water resistance are the Fotina shade, which is pretty dark. So that pisses off a number of people. I think it works with the color scheme. I think Omega's Fotina generally does, just like the No Time to Die watch. I think it's Fotina. It's so Fotina. It's the foiest of Fotina, but the color match is so good with the rest of the watch that if you would set aside the bias of that it looks artificially aged and just think of it as it's all about making colors work, I can accept it. But I understand others can't. So there's that aspect. Then the other big criticism I've seen from some people is the frustration that it is not a Sapphire Sandwich iteration. So it's a closed caseback and you do not get to appreciate the movement. Now, something, and I think Aussie expat who mentioned the Omega stuff earlier. So there's also pushback about the Ed White version and this like being more affordable and people liking the way that like, does this undermine the Ed White? Maybe that's an interesting thing because in a way, most of us, we don't care, do we? Like, unless you own an Ed White, you probably don't care. You probably just are just glad that there's something that's more vintage inspired, getting you this early space era style of the Omega, in a far better, like in almost every regard, a far better execution than they achieved the first time they did the FOIS, I guess, as the first Omega in space. So I think I don't know if we say it FOIS or FOIS, but so they've basically taken all of the things that were wrong with the first FOIS and they've fixed them. There are still a few things that nag at people that they don't like about it. But overall, this would be outside of the space watches entirely, because there are Speedmasters that I do like the looks of. This might be of their current catalog of moon-based Speedmasters. I'm going to go ahead and say this is my most favorite. Actually, I think I like it better than the Ed White. It's probably because of the colorway and everything else, but it'd probably be my favorite, quite frankly. Now, would I get it? No. I just don't care enough about the Speedmaster to be into it in that regard. But I think this is going to do very well. In fact, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's going to do better than the white dial Speedmaster, because I think the vintage look is more of an enthusiast, purist, collector style, whereas the white Speedmaster is going to appeal to a lot of people that would want a more modern looking watch in general, though the black dial probably still will do better than the white dial anyway in that competition, as it were. But I think this is going to do this is great. This is going to do very, very well. I did watch ID Guy's video about this. I know he really, 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 really liked this watch, and my tastes don't often. I was going to say my tastes don't often align with his, but they do on this one. I mean, I'm not sure my tastes often align with his or like he's not a Longa 1 fan, for example. It's one of my most favorite designs, but this I do agree. But I'm not out to buy it. But yeah, I think this was a very, very good job. And no, it's not perfect, but I think a lot of people that are fans of vintage Speedmaster in particular are going to fall head over heels trying to get a hold of this. So I think this is Omega's release of the year. I think this is, even if it doesn't end up outselling the white dial, I think it's definitely their most exciting thing I've seen out of them for quite a while. So I will say good job to them, even though it's not for me. So, all right, let's see what you guys all think, because you guys have thoughts, and your thoughts are more interesting than my thoughts are. So let's see here. We've got, let me go ahead and get caught up a bit. Let's see. Medgas Guy, welcome to live stream. Which line of Mosers hold their value the most? Probably the Streamliners, but I'm not certain. I've not really checked a lot of the pricing lines, but that's going to be my guess. My guess would be the Streamliners because of integrated sports watch hype. Plus, it's a pretty unique look, and I don't think they make all that many of them. DeRosa, welcome to live stream. The Fratello site has the best live photos. Hodinkee site is just PR. Well, navigate over to it then, because I just quickly grabbed some articles a couple of days ago before I even read them, and we don't need that Hodinkee trash if that's the case. I didn't even go and check Hodinkee or Fratello's site. I keep forgetting to. I went and checked Worn and Wounds, which I need to quit doing, because every time I go and check Worn and Wound, it's always just some new collaboration watch. It feels like that or some wind up that they're trying to push. So I'm still navigating while I scroll, because even though I clicked on it, I'm not seeing the watch, and it should be near the top. This just came out a couple of days ago, didn't it? I just do not know, guys. I'm gonna keep looking. Unless you meant like it's a video or something, in which case I'm not gonna play a video within a video. Guys, go over and check out the Fratello YouTube channel if you want to watch their videos. I just playing a video live on the video is too weird, and I feel it's too infringing on someone else's intellectual property anyway. So we'll go back to our awful PR stuff, just so I have an image up, so you don't have to just look at me. Pocket watch time. For over $5,000, 100 meters water resistance is a must. Oh, Seiko does it in their $200 watches. Well, but Seiko also has $4,000 watches, and they can't get their accuracy specs within 10 seconds a day, plus or minus, on their advertising. Like, they won't guarantee it beyond that. So I don't know what to tell you. They've clearly mastered water resistance and haven't mastered accuracy. So there you go. That's my patented Seiko dig for the day. Ding. There you go. It's a ding sound. Space G95, good morning. Glad you could make it to the live stream. Thomas, I'm a fan of the CK2998 look. The straight lugs and the flat link bracelet look great. Yeah, I didn't mention the straight lugs. The straight lugs, I think, look really good on this watch. I'm a fan of the alpha hands. The Fotina is a little strong, maybe. Fotina goes well with the blue style. The Fotina is not a little strong. The Fotina is super strong, but it does go good with the dial, so I forgive it. But other people are not going to forgive it. Yeah, the alpha style hands, they work really well with this style of watch. I guess I might criticize that it does look like we've got two of the same subdial style hand until the 9 o'clock, where this one is a different shape. Little disconcerting. It's so small in real life. Like, ultimately, I always notice that in blown up photos, but when I've had chronographs on the wrist, I don't really care what sort of hands the subdials use, quite frankly. They're too hard to notice, as long as they're legible. Adam says, I saw this yesterday. It has a nice dial. I like the dome sapphire crystal. 50 meters is enough water resistance. I like not having to pull out the crown to wind it. I am a fan of non-screw. You can get 100 meters of water resistance without a screw down crown. Now, that's a whole nother story, because there are plenty of you guys, probably some of you here in the live stream, that do not trust a water resistance watch that says it's 100 without a screw down crown. However, Hamilton does this all the time. The gasket systems are perfectly good to do 100 meters of water resistance without a screw down crown, but a lot of people cannot accept it. So I think it's a psychological barrier, but regardless, if it stops people from buying the watch, it stops people from buying the watch. I love being able to wind the watch. You're really not supposed to wind watches while they're on your wrist, but I do have a tendency on dress watches to fiddle with the winding if I'm sitting around and I'm bored. And them not being screw down means I can do it. I never do that with a screw down watch because I'd have to unscrew it for me to play with it. Trap Vision, welcome to the live stream. You never have to apologize for being late. A wizard is never late. He arrives exactly when he means to. Adam says, saw it, as in I held it in person. Oh, really? Okay, nice. How did it? Well, you said it had a nice style. Did it? I don't know if you set it on your wrist, if it felt good or not. I've heard good things about the flat link bracelet, so that's why I'm kind of mentioning it. Colby says, I like the normal Sapphire Speedy way better than this. I don't like the handset on this one, and I think the fake patina looks bad here. So a very polarized different take. Good to hear the other impressions. I definitely could see on the well, I like it. I definitely can see, because there's people that it's ride or die with Fotina. Like, if it's got Fotina, the watch is hashtag dead to them, because the notion of artificially aging things to look like old tritium just outright pisses them off, or they think it looks bad, or both, which is totally understandable take, in my opinion. And I've seen a lot of pretty poorly executed Fotina where it feels like, oh, you decided you needed to turn the dial to 11 on, hey, this is vintage. Hey, remember the past? Didn't you guys love the 50s sort of thing? So I get that. The handset, like, I like Delta style hands a lot, which are very pointed in a fashion much akin to this, which is a Parmigiani thing. So I think I already had a bias towards Alpha style hands, but again, I totally understand people getting pissed about or hating a particular handset type, because I can't stand cathedral hands. Absolutely can't stand them. And the irony is I can get behind a Mercedes hand, but once you start to deform that circle into a bulb shape, all of a sudden I can't stand it. I think it's one of the ugliest handset. Actually, cathedral hands are probably the ugliest handset I have ever seen. But that's not an issue with this watch because it doesn't have cathedral handsets. So definitely can't. This is a vintage watch, like it's a vintage looking watch. People that want a modern space watch style look are definitely going to gravitate more to the Sapphire Sandwich Speedmaster or the Hesalite. That's the other thing, is some people, I've seen a few, not many, don't like that it's Sapphire, that it should have been Hesalite, that it would have been warmer looking with Hesalite. And they've done some stuff with the crystal here to try and give it that vintage vibe, but it's hard to do. Zenith, I think, has done reasonably well with some of their vintage style sapphiring, and how I think they've done a better execution than the first Omega in Space reissue that they did. But yeah, there are things to pick apart on it for sure. All right, let's see. Adam says, it was spoken for, but like Colby said, I also prefer the current Speedy. Better bracelet than the flat links. I have a white dial, also want black. Oh, okay. I like the white dial over the black, personally. Aussie says, travesty. They are undercutting one of the only actually luxury handmade watches in the industry. You're meaning the Ed White, of course. Sure, but how many people have those? And this is what I'm going to pull from my pinball playbook, Aussie. This happens in pinball. It happens probably in lots of places. Happens in pinball. Whales are going to whale. Like they still have their Ed Whites. Right? That's the logic. They still have their Ed Whites. They have their White. You can see the movement on the Ed White. This is a closed case spec. It's not the same. It's different. They've got their special, better handmade thing. Omega's logic is probably they are not the same buyers. Or the Ed White people will still buy this because they're whales and they're going to spend, like, we already have them. They're Omega fanboys. They cannot escape our orbit. Just like the celestial bodies that they worship, hence why they buy every flavor of Moonwatch we come out with. This will just be another piece in their collection. And then there's still enough different things they'll point to on the Ed White set to say that it's different, that it's better. Your money's going into the movement that you can appreciate, and that's not any different now. So that's going to be the logic of it. Because ultimately, limited edition buyers in pinball have this happen. New premiums come out that look better than the limited editions. The limited edition, are people speculate, are the LE buyers are they going to punish these companies? They never do, though. Sometimes they whine. And I understand it because they're like, hey, you had this one version came out. It was supposed to be the best version. Now you came out with a non-limited version and it looks better. It's got, some of the mechanics look better, or we think they function or whatever. I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole too much, but they see all of that stuff and they get mad about it because they feel like their purchase was undercut. But here's the problem. They still make the next LE purchase. And those Ed White people, are they still going to buy Omega? I think Swatch Group thinks they will. And in that case, who cares what their feelings are? Like, fundamentally, from a business perspective, who cares if they're upset? If they're still spending money with you, their loyalty to you is beyond their emotion. And so that they'll get over their rage. That's what I'm going to theorize is their thinking. Except I'm not even sure Omega honestly gave a thought about what people who bought the Ed White think. Or they thought they've sold as many as they expect to sell of those and it's time to move on. Like that the blood is fully drenched from that. There's no juice left in that orange to squeeze out. There's no more blood in that stone. So it's like, whatever. We're not selling enough of them anymore. That slowed down too much. We gotta make another play, a more egalitarian play. So those are my guesses. But I absolutely understand people like you saying it's a total travesty that they came out with the watch. But we'll have to see, because if they're not punished for it by people who were buying the Ed White, then it doesn't fundamentally in the end matter in the realm of actual, sales and such. So that's the thought. Frank V, welcome to live stream. Frank, hate the patina. A lot of people hate the patina. I've heard a lot about it or read a lot about it. Aussie says 50 meters is still rubbish. That they can't get it to 100 is mysterious to me. But again, they're probably like, we sell plenty of them. I don't know. I don't know if they think about it or not. They probably just don't want to go to the engineering effort. Just like they don't get their DeVilles under 10 millimeters in thickness because they don't want to go to the effort. There's a lot of not going to the effort when it comes to Omega. Frank says, when you move your arms in the water, the actual resistance becomes greater. So no, don't trust 50 meters. Yes, that's where the actual depth is not the depth on most depth ratings. Patek tried to redo how depth is on their watches, and I don't know if it's going to work well or not. And Aussie says, it's rubbish, garbage. So another non-fan. Well, I already knew you were a non-fan of this watch from a couple days ago, but Captain says, hey, to Aussie. Adam says the bracelet felt thin for sure. Okay, interesting. I've had some bracelets. Like I tried out Zenith's ladder bracelet because I was worried if it would feel too unsubstantial. I actually like the bracelet on it, but the clasp. Not that Zenith doesn't have good clasps in general, but definitely wasn't one of my favorites. Aussie says 50 meters isn't an objective rating. It comes down to brand, what it means. I'd take a 1908 swimming before a Speedy. Yeah, no, it definitely does. As I mentioned, like with Patek, they're trying to say like their watches are 30 meter water resistance, but it's a dive 30. Who can keep it all straight? But as Aussie has noted, there's a fungibility to it all anyway. Pixel Punch, welcome to live stream. Looks like I cut the last minutes. I'm running long, is why. And we still have one more topic I have not gotten to. Have to watch this back later today. Have a good day. Well, I hope you have a great day. Pixel. Frank says, I'd rather age with my piece and not my wife, by the way. Gray hair on me, real patina on my watch. The issue, of course, is now that they aren't using tritium all the time, the Super Luminova watches aren't aging like that. That was a tritium look. So they're trying to emulate tritium without using tritium. You know, some brands do still use tritium, though they put them in tubes. So, but none of the major brands do. Aussie says, I agree. The thing is, First Omega in Space isn't a luxury watch, and the Ed White is, despite paying $7,000 before tax on the First Omega in Space. The pricing on Omega in general falls right in with my early on this live stream whining about Richemont's pricing with JLC, and we can have an interesting discussion on, though then I'll probably lose all my subscribers, about what is Omega within the Swatch Group in general, but within Omega and the serious price increases. Even the Hesalite Moonwatch has had some serious price increases. And just like Richemont and JLC, it's not like Swatch Group has gone out and bought up all the old Speedmasters off of the used market, like how we've seen in the past was done with Ulysse Nardin and stuff, or Cartier likes to do and destroy their watches before they let them fall into the hands of the plebes to keep their value high. There's so many good Speedmasters that you can get used for less than what they sold for new when the new prices were, still reasonable for people. But that is an industry-wide thing. So we will save it because we'll be here all day otherwise. Trap Fisher says, I actually like the white version over this one. I like the white version a lot, but I do personally prefer this. But again, mostly it's dial color, right? That the gray, me and my weakness for gray, I'm not proud of it. It's just how it is. Pocket Watch Time says, no Reverso or Speedmaster in my future, no matter what edition they make. Well, and fundamentally with the latter, that's the case for me. I still have no interest in owning Speedmaster. This changes nothing about that. Even if the price were half this, I still don't see myself owning a Speedmaster. There are other aspects about the design inherent to the Speedmaster I do not like, but I'm not going to focus on those because it's like applicable to all their moon watches. Aussie says, this thing isn't half the watch of an Ed White, but it's more than half the price. And the pricing and the logic of the pricing, it's like the old guess the price of the Seiko on the podcast that A Blog to Watch does. It's a whole other world in terms of trying to figure out what they're doing to set the pricing. And sometimes it feels like they almost dartboard the thing. Thomas says, me neither, Patrick. My pockets aren't deep enough. Frank says, do modern watches patina or the new treatments prevent that? I do not believe Super Luminova and the other equivalents patina. I believe that the brownness that we see is the half-life decay of tritium on the old watches. So do modern watches patina? A Marathon in a tritium tube perhaps would. Ball watches which use tritium we might see patina on those. These watches, no, I do not believe so. Travis says, Omega sales are declining, so maybe this could stop some of the bleeding. I think it's a play for that, but this has been in development for a while too. Like I'm sure they've been working on it for a couple of years. Captain says, I've been registered for an Ed White for a year and still waiting. I'm sorry to hear that, but let me continuing on. The Ed White is still in demand. The first Omega in Space will be an alternate to the Moonwatch and an addition for speedy collectors. See, that's how I think a lot of people are going to, I don't know of any, and I mean, Captain can only speak for Captain and I can only speak for me, but I don't imagine a lot of people are going to like get rid of their Ed Whites and get this. And I don't know if people, what I was going to ask is, do you think people get off of the waiting list for an Ed White and just get this? I don't think so. Because again, with everything else is going for it, like with the movement and everything, I think that's what Omega thinks the Ed White's going to be able to rely on. And now whether or not the Ed White buyers are going to be pissed at this comes down to perhaps the reasons they went for the Ed White, of course. But that's true for anything. DeRosa said, the Speedy Pro can be found 20% off easily. Be interested in seeing what happens with First Omega and Space pricing. Icy said, I think genuine 321s are less than the Ed White, and that he is on the list for the Ed himself and might remove himself. So there is a perspective. Okay, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Again, this is not my watch. So like, it's not my watch style. So I can't give you a good example of any of that. All right, we're going to end on a light topic. We're not going to, this one I added this morning about 10 minutes before I went live because this came up on Friday and I figured we'd have a little brief conversation on it. I'm just going to blow this out. I was going to, the link in the article, the Hodinkee letter or whatever you want to consider it, is down here below, but there's really not much to go over because it's so long, but it's from Ben Clymer. But long story short, if you haven't heard yet, Watches of Switzerland, the major watch retailer, has acquired Hodinkee. So this has probably been in the works for, well, obviously it's been in the works for quite a while. It wouldn't surprise me if this is why Hodinkee had to start liquidating out of their retail watch business, because they are now owned by a retail watch business. So I just wanted to have a brief discussion with you all about what do we think this means for Hodinkee, and I guess for Watches of Switzerland for that matter. I know this came up a little bit on the Watches with Dennis Discord. Thomas with the Escapement Show has provided some thoughts. I think he thinks this is more meaningful than I do. So here's my quick perspective. I don't see editorially, I'm not sure yet. That's the part that I'm not sure. Editorially, there's what this is going to mean. Watches of Switzerland wants Hodinkee for a reason. That they got Hodinkee for peanuts, I get. Okay, so maybe this is a bit of a lark. They had the cash on hand to be able to do it. Hodinkee's not worth much anymore. So let's buy it to do something, right? I'm assuming pointing people to Watches of Switzerland stores, online purchasing, articles, like, are they going to be a good venue to get watches that then maybe they're having trouble selling over to get hands-on reviews with Hodinkee? Like, it could play up in a variety of ways. In terms of editorial independence, I'm not too worried about that aspect of it, because Hodinkee hasn't been editorially independent in a long time, in my opinion. When they were trying to sell watches, and all of you who've probably browsed their Hodinkee website more than me know, it started to really feel like they were working to try and sell things in the shop. Like, that became a big arm of Hodinkee. And I'm at the point where I don't feel like it could feel any worse and oppressive than that was. Hodinkee's already made the pivot away from doing lifestyle brand stuff, like trying to sell sneakers and all the rest of it, and be like this thing that's beyond watches. So we've already seen that transition. So I don't think this improves that, but I don't think it hurts it either. Does it help Watches with Switzerland? Ultimately, it could. Like, if there's stuff that's pointing to Watches of Switzerland, I definitely could see why they would see it as a reasonable gamble of an investment, especially as cheap as it was, because Hodinkee still has a lot of cash. Like, the name it's the most known name in watch journalism. Even if a lot of us who are really into things, there's still a soft spot for Hodinkee, even though Hodinkee Travel Clock On started to just tarnish themselves with so many people. I don't know. I don't know that their writing caliber is as high as is claimed. Like, I think like Ben has really been emphasizing a lot of stuff about the writing team that he has, but I don't think it's as good as the veteran writing team when they paid a lot more money for their writers. I'm not saying their current writers are bad, but they've lost almost all of their big popular names that they had. Also, one of the things here that is noted is that Ben he's back full time with Hodinkee. So he's now going to be the president. He stepped down from that role in 2020 as CEO. And a lot of people feel that this brand, Hodinkee brand, went off the rails big time at that point. I don't know if Ben's the right guy to steer this anymore. I think a lot of people feel like he's not into the watches the way he once was. And part of that is when you step away from being in the role of CEO, you're going to get that vibe. Him stepping back into it at this point, I don't think it's good or bad. I don't have confidence that he knows how to fix this. I think he very much feels like he built this and he can fix it, which is understandable. And there's an understandable, I think, degree of arrogance that you would expect from an entrepreneurial style person. But some of the stories that have come out about how Ben behaved when they were kind of at the height of their money, bringing on Crown and Caliber and all of that. Again, these are just things that really hardcore people following the industry have heard about. They didn't leave a good look, in my opinion. And so I don't know how many people are going to want to go and work for him. Like, is he going to bring back his old writers? Is Jack Forrester going to come back? I don't think so. And that's the thing that I just don't know if this move really makes much of a difference. I'm assuming that he now has like
stock options with Watches of Switzerland. Watches of Switzerland stock is absolutely tanked this year. It is not in a great place as a business either. Not surprising given the cool down of the market in general, which is probably most of what's impacted Watches of Switzerland. But I know a lot of people have been looking at them because ever since Bucherer got acquired by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, the owners of Rolex and Tudor, there's been some questions about what might happen with inventory on Rolex watches. And we haven't seen that yet. But the thought is if Bucherer is going to get more choice pieces and stuff, it could really diminish Watches of Switzerland because just like any multi-purpose AD, it's Rolex that moves the units. It's Rolex that makes those brands money. So Watches of Switzerland is very dependent on Rolex to actually have the sort of wide-scale success that they've been able to wield as a brand. So I didn't say a lot because this is new news. It's basically I don't think this makes Hodinkee better. I don't think it makes it worse, but I don't think this is a good thing or necessarily a bad thing. I was more excited when I thought they would be completely independent of selling watches because I thought the potential hypothetically was there for them to be able to restore their journalistic integrity. I don't think you can do that under the auspices of a retailer like Watches of Switzerland. Just like Teddy Balasar has hired a high quality journalist who works to write stuff for his site, but there will always be a distrust. There will always be a distrust of those sort of entities that are trying to sell you products, and they're writing about the products they sell. It's part of the reason why, because this is a hobby channel, and I would never be able to do enough work, quite frankly, to build my channel up enough to make me remotely as much money as I make professionally. And I enjoy my professional career too much. So that's why it's easy for me to keep independent on it because I have no delusions that this channel is ever going to be anything other than a small channel to have fun talking about watches and hearing people agree and disagree with those takes. But for a brand like Hodinkee, which wants to be journalists, to be owned by an entity that wants to be reviewed positively, I know Watches of Switzerland isn't a brand that's making watches, but I just don't think it's enough steps removed to ever bring Hodinkee. Hodinkee will never again be the top site for true watch journalism, not under a brand, not under a retailer. That's my take. But anyway, so those are my thoughts. Let me go ahead and get caught up with you guys because I know I've seen a number of things go ahead and flow in with these discussions. Sorry, I'm seeing where some of the things were going. It was right after Aussie had mentioned maybe pulling himself off the list for the Ed White. Trap Mission says nobody makes Aussie wait for a watch. A match made in heaven, the worst reputations in the industry in terms of some of the prior discussion. But anyway, so I just thought it funny. So, but thank you guys for being here and sharing those thoughts, especially the polarizing thoughts on that first Omega in space. I do appreciate it. Very interesting too. It's weird for me looking in at a watch and in a watch company that I don't think a whole lot. I mean, I think about Omega all the time. It's just like Speedmasters are just not my watch. So I have like no investment in it. So it's so interesting to see people be like, this is awesome. I love it. Like ID guy. And then I see Aussie like, this is absolute trash. And they're poisoning the Ed White and all the opinions in between of, I like this thinner bracelet. This bracelet feels like crap. I was going to swear, but I try and keep it clean. Just all that. It's just really fun to me. David, welcome to the live stream, by the way, if I haven't said it already. Hodinkee writers would be fools to write about anything about any of the brands that Watches of Switzerland carries. So even if Watches of Switzerland doesn't directly interfere, Hodinkee itself will self-censor. But that's not possible, is it? I mean, what would they write about? Micro brands? I mean, that's not Hodinkee's audience. I'm loading up Watches of Switzerland. The problem is Watches of Switzerland, David, carries everything. That's why I would agree. Like that could work if they were to like dodge it and be like, all right, we're going to cover, we're owned, so we're going to stay out of that realm, right? We're just going to dodge all this. So here we go. Watches of Switzerland's website. Rolex, Patek, Cartier, Grand Seiko, Tudor, Omega, Breitling, Tag, Hublot. All on the top banner. Okay. You don't have you can't be the #1 watch journalism site in the world and not talk about those brands. Like let me do it in a YouTube, even a little baby 3,000 subscriber YouTube channel like mine. If I didn't talk about these brands ever, I wouldn't even have half these subs. Like no Tudor, that's the YouTube darling. You can't do no Tudor. Omega, We just had this great discussion about the first Omega in space. You have to have a Rolex. Rolex is the number one watch company. You can't. They didn't cover it like they're like. If we just went like, what are they going to talk about? Like Parmigiani, Gerard Perregaux, Seiko. You can get somewhere, but you can't get far without these brands. I know they have to talk about these brands. That's the thing. Can you imagine Hodinkee writers not writing about Rolex releases? I can't. I literally can't imagine it. I just can't. So that way, I agree. This would be the right thing to do, but they can't do it. They cannot do it. Pixel says, another acquisition meant to advertise Hodinkee already had a bad reputation lately, and now it'll be worse. I mean, I don't know if we'll go full travel watch. Ben actually mentions the travel watch in that article, in that letter, right? Which I do have a link in the video description. You can go to Hodinkee with the link and just and read what he wrote. But he even mentioned it. Like, I think he said something about it being better than what, like, that it's like better than people realize. I'm like, Don't ever mention the travel. Like it's Fight Club. You don't ever talk about Travel Clock. If you work for Hodinkee, you don't talk about Travel Clock. Trap Vision says there's an article that states Hodinkee is one of the very reasons people became watch collectors. Oh, absolutely. I think Koji, who's been in the live chat today, like there's an article about his watch collection on Hodinkee. Like they have touched so many people, but it would be such a pivot to not cover like the major Swiss brands. That's like their bread and butter. Like, I mean, in YouTube, it's different space. Like we can go in and focus in on all sorts of reels. Like I know people that have channels, huge channels that focus just on Seiko and stuff, but a broad-based journalism site like them, they need to be able to cover all the major brands. It's the only way it can possibly work. Captain says the younger guy, Tony Spina, is very knowledgeable and critical to Hodinkee's future, in my opinion. Okay, I'll have to go in and see about I don't always pay attention to the bylines lately because I'm usually just hitting the first release things for like YouTube purposes. So I'll have to go and I've not read them like objectively, just sat there and just read them for joy in quite a while. So it's good to know. You can do young talent and build them up. Absolutely. You can take a farm team and make them great. I'm not saying it's impossible for Hodinkee to do it. It's just instant success isn't going to be that way, obviously. So it's going to be a struggle, I think. Thomas says, I'm glad to see Ben back as president of Hodinkee. I'm guessing that he was paid with Watches of Switzerland shares, which he posted have gone up. Will Jack Forster make a return now that he's at Revolution? I don't think they can. I think I read that Hodinkee paid huge salaries for those writers in the past. I don't know that even with Watches of Switzerland backing that they're going to do that going forward. So I don't think so. I think Jack might just be diversifying a little bit. Maybe he does it as a guest writer and he gets paid by the article. Like I used to write short stories and stuff. And I think maybe, I don't remember if I did art. It was a long time ago. It's like almost 30 years ago. But I would, I get paid by the word and I turn them in and I do that sort of thing. So for fun, he might do that as an occasional writer. Jack is still employed by a 1916 company. Is going to be a case of how long will Ben stick around? Is it going to be a case of how long will Ben stick around? I think I'm not too worried about that per se, unless Watches of Switzerland gets tired of how he's running it, which at this point I wouldn't be too concerned. Captain says Hodinkee Insurance through Chubb is very easy to use and a profitable business, and that's being rolled in somewhat like that. My understanding is going to be a continuation. Now, I had opined back when they were getting rid of their retail business, keeping the Chubb insurance was smart. And that's not a conflict. I don't think it's a conflict because as long as they don't talk about watch insurance, aside from, them like we don't care about watch journalists covering all the different, like my watches are insured with State Farm because I have a multi-line plan. So I've added a personal articles policy and I have my State Farm policy and I've not priced Chubb because there's a general, like the rule of thumb is approximately 1% of your watch value per year is going to be your premium on watch insurance. It's kind of like the rule of thumb. So it's like, I don't know that the margins are really there, but it was an easy site. And a lot of people who don't have a whole lot of other types of insurance or don't want to set, I already had a personal articles policy. So it's like, it was a great option. And I don't think it caused any conflict with them writing about brands because Chubb isn't owned by Rolex. So I thought that was a perfectly good thing for them to stay in the business with, but clearly they want more than just having that. They want to be owned by Watches of Switzerland. DeRosa says, journalistic integrity is a fantasy in the luxury world. It is all selling all the time. True. But we can dream. And I mean, it's tough. Like you see others like Worn and Wound and Fratello and all the collab watches. And Hodinkee was still doing their limited edition collabs. And then there's a blog to watch, which they don't do that, no. But then there's all the written like it's a real article, sponsored post. And they are labeled as sponsored posts. But if you don't notice the byline, it looks like a normal article. I've clicked on a few and then realized that it's a sponsored post, and it kind of irritates me. It's just not a great way to monetize because people don't want to pay for a subscription. We still have struggled to adapt to the non-newspaper model of today's journalism. It's tough. And it's not like we're going to these sites for classifieds, which was another newspaper angle. So just is what it is. But yeah, but I still have that idealism in me about journalistic integrity. Underhay says, I agree. Any company that relies on advertising revenue will never objectively criticize the luxury brands. That's why we watch small YouTube channels. But small YouTube channels don't get as much access and stuff. Like, and it's like where you draw the line gets tough too. Like conceptually, I would probably be okay with accepting a watch for review if I sent it back. So then I could tell you guys that I don't get to keep the watch and sell it for money. Because that's an easy line to go. That's a contamination, and it wouldn't be trustworthy. But do there become concerns if I get a watch from like Christopher Ward, which is offered to do this with me? Send me a watch, and then I send it back. But is there still the concern that I would want to preserve that relationship? Because currently they give me embargoed photos. Like I've started getting those, and I've used those because I don't get any money. They don't get to see my video ahead of time, so there's no relationship there beyond they choose to send me things and tell me I'm not allowed to use these photos before a certain date, which is pretty standard for video game reviews and all the rest of it. But is getting a product, even if I give it back, is the concern like, well, he's relying on them getting those products. Can we trust him? So I've stayed away from it. But the downside is like if it comes to watch reviews, which I don't do very many of, because all you get are the reviews of my own collection. But that even begs the question, are those going to be really negative reviews? Because I already own the product. Am I going to be willing to attack something I own myself? I mean, there's always, there's always the degree of subjectivity, and then you have to decide like where in the world that line falls. And different people it falls for. It's subjective. The subjectivity of the line is subjective. Different. Those of you have different scales on that. I know plenty of people who trust Jody at Just One More Watch, even though he gets those watches and gets to sell them, and they like how he discloses it and how he organizes the videos, and they trust him. And there are other people that are like, I will not watch him because I know he gets those are money in his pocket, and they can't stand it, even with his disclosures. So it's tough. It's tough. But when you're a channel that don't need it for your living, I don't have to waste a lot of time thinking about it. So, because it's not a big deal to me one way or the other. Y'all either be here or you won't. David said, sorry, I meant to say that Hodinkee won't write anything negative about the brands watches of Switzerland carries. Well, your first written statement let me have a much more interesting discussion, but all right. Yeah. Yes, I agree. They already, before they had this watches of Switzerland relationship, had that rep. I don't remember when it was. I think it was 2022. I did a video. No one watched it. And I'm going to plug it, but I'm not going to plug it enough to give you guys a link. I took a month of their reviews. I read all of them and to analyze them based off of my own criteria of whether they used any negative language. Those reviews were so overwhelmingly positive. And by that, I wasn't like measuring positive words versus negative. It was how many reviews did they write where they said anything negative? And it was hardly any. And it was really only one author who tended to do it. And I think most of his gripes were always that the watch was too big. Who cares? So no, they've not been a critical source for a long time. But all right, holy cow, I went way, way, way long. I don't think I've gone this long on a Saturday ever. So apologies for how long it went for some of you. Of course, you could just log off when you wanted to. There will not be a weekday stream this next week. I'm too busy to be able to do that. I will plan to be back next Saturday. Those of you who attended live today, thank you so much, especially for all the robust feedback on your perspectives on the Omega. That got a lot of good discussion. I thought it was really interesting. If you're watching this recording, leave your thoughts on the watch below, because I'm not planning to do a standalone video about it. This is the only one you're getting on that watch or any of these other ones. If you want to know more a little bit about the JLC Reversos, at least the pink gold one, I did do a live stream on Thursday. That's now encoded and fully available, so you can go back and watch that if you're curious to see about one of those, plus my other 4 picks of my favorite current production JLCs that exist. Not for Patrick Pocket Watch Time, because he would dislike all of them. And that will be it for this episode. So thank you so much for joining. I will talk to you all on the next stream. Until then, I hope you all have a really good weekend. Take care.